Alright, what's up everybody? It is the Dark Conservatarian on DarkCon Entertainment. And so there was this video here that I had saw from Ben Shapiro, somebody who I quite frankly quite like actually, but he did a review on Avengers Endgame, and so I thought that it was too off base to go without responding to, and I thought why not do this on my secondary channel as opposed to my primary channel, because I don't think many people would be interested in that on my primary channel. And while at it, also test out the new green screen that I got going on here. So tell me what y'all think of that when you go to watch this. But without further ado, let's get right into this. And I just rewatched this, so just recently before starting this stream, so should remember what I want to talk about.
So, I saw Avengers Endgame last night with my wife. Now, I didn't hate it, okay? It's a little strong to say that I hated Avengers Endgame, but I don't really like throwing cold water on people's favorite movies and the things that they love a lot. Well, I won't say I don't like doing it. I don't enjoy it more than I should. In any case, Avengers Endgame, it is...
I'm sorry, I sometimes find the sarcastic snark that he gives off in his episodes of his show just mildly entertaining sometimes.
1 million hours long is the Wagnerian ring cycle, and it has moments.
Yeah, one thing that I really gotta admire about Avengers Endgame is that it is like basically the longest running big blockbuster to be released in theaters, like on the big screen, like A-grade long 3-hour movie. It was like the longest movie since Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. So that's really quite a staple right there.
But there are a bunch of spoilers coming, guys. It does not work
Oh,
as a film. It does not work as a film.
Get out of my face.
Basically
Thanks, but no
all of the main
thanks.
characters that you actually care about in favor of a bunch of characters you don't. It's got the Star Wars problem.
I did not quite see that problem, honestly. I mean, we still got the Guardians characters for one thing. I mean, yes, Captain America and Iron Man, they're out of the game. Thor is pretty soon going to be out of the game as well. But we still got the Guardians, and really they're not quite done with Hawkeye. And of course, Black Widow is out of the mix as well. And we still got Hulk around, Ant-Man and the Wasp, if you can like still consider them like original characters. They're not part of the original 6 as far as Avengers go, granted, but still, I don't see what the point is right there. They haven't brought in quite yet all the new characters, like the really new characters, like Spider-Man and Captain Marvel, and completely replace the old characters with those types of characters and whatnot. So, I don't know, it seems to be like a bit of a moot point or whatever that Ben is bringing up right there.
New Star Wars basically took all the characters you like and killed them off to make room for characters that you don't actually care about. Now, here's a little bit of the trailer, and then I'll explain all...
One second, I think I'm going to like test my audio here.
Here's a little bit of the trailer, and then I'll explain
One second, I think I'm going... Okay, never mind.
all of the problems with Avengers Endgame.
I fought my way out of that cave. Became Iron Man. Realized I loved you.
By the way, I did notice that there's like a loud hiss in my microphone. I do not know exactly how to fix that, especially on an OBS stream.
The world has changed. None of us can go
It relies on the nostalgia that you have for the last 16 films, and it is a cool thing that they were somehow able to put together 16 films that led all the way up to this final film. Like that.
That is a legitimate critique about modern day Hollywood, is the lack of originality with Hollywood, and it just relies too much on past nostalgia and past already established films and franchises and whatnot. But considering that Avengers Endgame is like pretty much the finale of a long drawn out series, or anthology rather, that's another pointless point to be making up. Of course it is going to be like bringing up, past things and aspects of the franchise. and an already established franchise, obviously.
That's really a neat achievement on a cinematic level. The problem is that none of this works, and they destroy all of your favorite characters, with probably the
Explain how that doesn't work.
exception of Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson, who finally gets a character arc that is worthy of her acting skills. So here are
Notice that he says that, but later on he does go mentioning that there is a few other characters that they did right with the movie. Primarily Hawkeye, I think I remember him mentioning.
all the spoilers. So Iron Man obviously plots this, right? At the end, Iron Man dies. Iron Man's character arc is the only interesting thing in this movie, but they totally botch it. The reason that they botch it is because Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr.'s character, for all of his movies, the struggle for Iron Man has been not, do I go save the world or am I selfish? That solves in movie one, right? The rest of the movies are all about, will he settle down with Potts? Will he settle down?
The rest of the movies, as far as I could tell, especially going from the first Avengers and onward, was how Tony basically feels like that he got the weight of the world on his shoulders, essentially, of how he feels like he is obligated to, like, save the world, protect the world, and so on and so forth, but he's not able to, like, lift himself from that burden, so it's kind of an inner turmoil and depression that he's going through that. So, I mean, I don't see... I mean, yes, there is a bit of a maturation aspect right there, but I think you are forgetting the whole misery and, you know, essentially weight of the world type of aspect regarding Tony's character arc, Ben.
Will he build a family?
And then, of course, by the time that he dies and that Pepper mentions that, hey, before he dies, hey, Tony, it's alright. You can rest now. It's done. That is supposed to be like basically the weight lifted off his shoulders right before he takes his last breath.
Can he contain himself? Will he become a solid citizen? Right? That was the struggle of Robert Downey Jr. When was he going to grow up and be an adult? That was the question of Robert Downey Jr. And after...
Well, I would kind of think that feeling like that you are obligated to protect other people, it is in a way a certain adult aspect. I mean, when is he going to grow up and settle down as a father? That would have been the more appropriate way of framing his arc in the in Endgame. Will he settle down and become a father? Not will he necessarily grow up. But you know, anyway.
After Thanos snaps his fingers in the first 45 minutes of the movie, you find out that Robert Downey Jr. has gotten married to Pepper Potts and that he has actually had a kid with her. And this is good, right? This is a good setup. And then it arises through really dumb coincidence. Hey guys, have you ever had the idea of time travel? Have you thought about it? Like, seriously? And then Robert Downey Jr. is like, oh man, well, I guess, and I haven't thought about it, it's impossible. Well, I have 5 minutes here. So in 5 minutes, he comes up with a time travel plan. So
that, I will admit, is kind of a legit criticism because it seems like in one day, in one evening's time, or at least under a week's time, Tony by himself figures out time travel. That was kind of hokey right there, but, you know, they don't have all the time in the world to, like, set up inside the movie. It would have made more sense if, like, Tony was, like, secretly trying to develop a plan for time travel in the 5 years ever since Thanos snapped away, you know, half of life and so forth. That would have been nice if they, like, actually gave a glance at that. You know, kind of gave a wink and a nod that was actually what happened, was that he was building up to it for the past 4 to 5 years, instead of just, you know, doing it in one evening, as the movie is almost implying, which was honestly kind of cartoony. I will give Ben that.
forget about how silly that is. It comes up with a time travel plan in the next 5 minutes. It's an Avengers film. You can't look for, you know, him to spend 4 years trying to figure out how time travel works or anything like that. But here's the problem. Now, Tony Stark has stakes. The stakes are, and they present this choice, it's ready to be made. The stakes are, do you go back and change the past, and thus lose what you have built for yourself in the aftermath of you becoming a mature human being? Lose a daughter. Do you sacrifice your own daughter to save the world? Right? That's a real moral choice. But then they obviate that choice in the next 30 seconds of the film, where they explain that if they go back and change the past, it won't actually change this timeline, and therefore Tony Stark's kid will still be alive, and his wife will still be alive, and everything will be hunky-dory. So now...
Well, there are some stakes in that they affect all the other alternate timelines if they were to, like, take the Infinity Stones and just leave the Infinity Stones taken out of those, alternate timelines right there. So there is that. But with the point of Tony possibly losing his family, particularly his daughter, if they were to, like, change their past, that would have been, like, an interesting little plot point to theorize on and to make fan theories and fan fictions about, like, that would have been a weightier choice on what Tony is to do. But that's more of a that's only a very slight nitpick right there, Ben, of what they could have possibly done to improve the movie. But the fact that they did not do that specifically instead of the route that they did do with Tony and his family and whatnot doesn't necessarily make it a worse movie than it already is.
Now this just becomes another Iron Man film, where it's about Tony Stark risking himself to go save the world, but there are no heightened stakes at all. So you've built up to his final character transformation into a responsible human being. And the question is going to be, now is he even more responsible than the responsible human being? He's built a family. Now is he willing to sacrifice his own family and his own happiness in order to save the world? And the answer is, we're not going to make him answer the question, because we don't have the gut.
And honestly, that would have been kind of too dark for all the younger audiences watching Avengers and whatnot. So I do not know if Disney was ready to make that kind of decision with the story and whatnot.
Guts to actually pose that choice. So that's the problem with Iron Man's character. Captain America's character, the problem with Captain America's character is they've always gotten it wrong. So Captain America is basically John McCain. He's supposed to be this crotchety old guy in a young guy's body, a man out of time. Captain America has never felt like a man out of time to me. He's just felt like generic superhero who's kind of dopey and a good guy. Right? That's the way Chris Evans has played him, and this isn't just because Chris Evans dislikes me.
There is, well, there is like one point as to where they kind of imply that he is like a man out of time, and where that Captain America, he's trying to like fix the helicarrier or help fix the helicarrier as it is falling in Avengers 1. This is going back to, way back so many movies. But back in Avengers, the first Avengers, he tries to help Iron Man fix the helicarrier, keep it flying and whatnot. And he's just all confused about the technicalities and the mechanics of everything. And he just says, it looks like it runs on some form of electricity. And then Tony says, well, you're not wrong on that part there. So there is that one point right there that kind of references that, that Steve is, in fact, a man out of time. But aside from that, Ben does have kind of a point. But there is not necessarily an implication, I think, to where he is explicitly, that he does fully fit in my opinion anyways. Although, then again, I think I would have to, like, rewatch Winter Soldier. It's been a while since I watched that, and I don't quite fondly remember the exact plot-by-plot, point-by-point plot of Captain America Winter Soldier.
Chris Evans, apparently, the people who write the script basically felt that he would just be like any normal guy. Like, if you saw Captain America without the uniform, you wouldn't know he's Captain America. He's just a guy. Well, that's not how the character is in the comics, and that's not how the character should be here. So the stakes for Captain America aren't extraordinarily high. Now, Captain America's ending, where they have him...
Well, and by the way, I am going to say right now, the stakes are high for, like, the movie and just everybody in the movie in general. Like, ultimately, of course, y'all who have watched Avengers Endgame know that Thanos, he has decided to change his mind and wipe out all existing life in the entire universe. Like, those are what the stakes are. Or at least that is what develops to become the stakes. Like, they were not... Originally, when you first watch a movie, you're not suspecting that Thanos will, like, come back from the past and then, come to the future, like, 5 years after the snap and then destroy all life. Or at least I don't think anybody got that. I didn't get that from the very bare beginning of the movie. I got it probably about at the halfway point or something. Suspected that was what was going to happen. But anyway, that's just me being rambly right there. But no, the stakes were high in that Thanos wanted to wipe out all of the universe. At some points, honestly, I was kind of on the edge of my seat wondering of what would happen if he, like, got all 5 of the stones again in the final battle. But let's move on.
basically go back in time, and then he is able to, and then he basically just stays back in time with the love of his life. I was fine with that. I really didn't have a huge problem with it.
Honestly, aside from the plot hole of how they explain the time travel mechanics as to how going back to affect the past does not affect your timeline's future, when ultimately that's kind of what Captain America did, was that, he ended up affecting their future by going in the past, and that he grows old and he becomes part of that main timeline, so forth. Aside from that slight plot hole there, I overall did like that scene. And honestly, I got kind of choked up, even more at the death of than at the death of Iron Man, that Steve Rogers finally got to find his place back in time, and settle down and actually be with the love of his life and so forth. Be the average Joe Schmo finally.
His ending, I thought his ending was the most appropriate. I thought Iron Man dying, even that would have been appropriate if they had set it up properly. That was okay. The person who...
I don't see honestly, I don't see what was wrong with Tony Stark's. Like, I get the point as to how they could have made him better, but just because they did not do him any better doesn't make him outright bad. And same with Captain America, by the way.
I really couldn't stand what they did with him was Thor. So what they did with Thor makes no sense on a character level. So I understand you guys wanted the joke. You wanted Thor with the dad bod. Got it. Okay, you wanted to be fat and burp a lot and be Big Lebowski. Okay, it's funny. For the first 5 minutes. And then this is not Thor. Right? We've had several Thor movies at this point. Thor's problem has never been lack of courage.
Well, the thing is that all these characters go through their own developments, and before I go commentating, I gotta let this play out because Ben goes mentioning the whole lack of courage part, supposedly, of Fat Thor.
5 minutes. And then this is not Thor. Right? We've had several Thor movies at this point. Thor's problem has never been lack of courage.
Okay, there's the thing. I never saw really a lack of courage with Thor. In fact, even in the movie's own dialogue, when, Professor Hulk, Bruce, whatever you want to call him now, he says, "I know that you're scared, Thor," and Thor goes all like, "Scared? Who's scared? Who was the one that killed Thanos?" That part right there. I mean, yeah, I guess there's a possibility that he was scared, but I did not really see that. Honestly, I still don't see that he was scared. I just saw that he was guilty. Very guilty. As far as him trying to reshape events, reshape the present by undoing the snap or helping to undo the snap, I did not see really anything about him being a fraidy cat or whatever. Like, the most afraid he was talking to his own mother. That's it. But as far as the idea of fighting Thanos himself, I never really got that implication. I don't know why everyone else, and particularly Ben here, gets that implication that Thor was scared when we're first reintroduced to him in Endgame.
It's always been that he is afraid that he does not have the moral fiber to be the leader. It's been that he's afraid of leadership. That's been his moral conflict, is that he's been afraid of leadership the whole time, and leadership has to be thrust upon him, and then he realizes he's a leader. But instead they decided to go the direction of, not that he doesn't want to take leadership, but that he's afraid to participate himself, that he won't even participate. And so they make him basically a drunk weakling.
Well, ultimately he does participate, and honestly, I saw the first opening scene, the opening scene for Fat Thor, I mean, when Professor Hulk arrives to him. When he's told of what their plan was, I kind of suspected that there was a part of Thor that honestly did want to help undo the snap and get rid of his guilt. But he was still feeling all depressed and feeling and I guess there is one other thing that he is afraid of, failing the universe again. That he's partially afraid of possibly failing the universe again, and so on and so forth. But he just needed a little bit more incentive. He still had that driving motivation that maybe he wants to help undo the snap, but he's still not quite there in that mindset. Then as soon as Rocket mentions beer, he's all like, "Oh, okay, that's a tipping point. All right then, I'll go along."
And it's silly. and you never actually get to see Thor really in action because they've decided to saddle him with a fat suit for the joke.
Well, honestly, you don't hardly see anyone in action throughout the entire movie because, in all honesty, when it comes to action, Infinity War had a whole lot more action than Endgame, overall, I would say. And in a way, I guess that's why that a lot of people say that Infinity War is better than Endgame, and honestly, I would almost agree that Infinity War is better than Endgame. Not just in that department, but as an overall movie, honestly. But hardly nobody got hardly any action. Not just Fat Thor, but the only person that like really got more action is the people is Captain America himself when he goes fighting himself, and then at the end scene where everyone else was just fighting everyone and so on and so forth. Like there were these smaller battles throughout the middle and whatnot, but there was no like big action scenes like in comparison to Vision and Wanda versus the two Black Order guys. I can't even remember their names for the life of me, honestly. And then Captain America and Black Widow have to come in and help Wanda and Vision and so on and so forth. But honestly, nobody got that much action. So the fact that Thor did not get that much action except for at the bare end of the movie is not a real downturn, not a real point to be made there.
Which is, again, not in character and also very silly. Like, I was waiting for the point where Thor would just kind of take the hammer or the axe and slam it on the ground, the lightning comes and he's back to being old Thor, right? I was waiting for that sort of transformation.
That honestly would have been nice, but it wasn't that big a deal with me. Like, honestly, I do suspect that he will like work off all the flab, all the fat and whatnot by the time that we get to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
That never really happens. And in fact, the best thing about Thor is in the first 5 minutes of the film when he kills Thanos, right? The first 5 minutes of the film.
And I will admit that that is actually the best part with Thor as far as badassery goes, is him decapitating Thanos. But there's nothing that I can say that is outright bad regarding Thor.
Where he chops Thanos' head off. That's the best thing that he's got in the entire film. The rest of the time, he's basically wasted, which is a pity.
Another ad. Jeez. Get the F out of here.
Because Chris Hemsworth can actually hold his own on screen. I don't think Chris Evans can. I think Chris Hemsworth can with Robert Downey Jr., but they don't give him anything to do except be funny, which he is. I mean, in that there's a final kind of thing with Chris Pratt and Chris Hemsworth that's very funny. Okay, but he was supposed to be more than a funny character. If you watch the first Thor film directed by Kenneth Branagh, it was supposed to be far more serious. Also, as my business...
Well, you gotta keep in mind, Ben, though the first two Thor movies did not do so well, especially Thor the Dark World. People only really started liking cinematic Thor by the time that Thor Ragnarok came along, and of course, Avengers Infinity War. Like, those are like peak Thor right there, in my honest opinion. Endgame, he wasn't outright bad, but in both the first Thor and in the Dark World, people did not like Thor all that much then, and they certainly did not like him in Age of Ultron. Then there's the first Avengers. I don't think he really stuck out to a whole lot of people either there as well. I mean, yeah, he was serious, but the audiences did not like it that much, so you're kind of going against general consensus, which I'm not trying to pull an appeal to popularity right here with Ben, but still. I don't see what is so wrong with them adding a dash of some humor, maybe here and there, the MCU. And this is not just the problem with Thor, by the way. Fat Thor, more specifically. This is like a bit of a nitpick with the entirety of the MCU, is that they might here and there add a little bit too much humor. Like, for example, the way that they explain Nick Fury losing his eye in Captain Marvel. He ends up getting clawed out by Goose, the alien cat thing or whatever. I did not like that bit of retconning of his whole character arc and, the past story, all for the sake of a goofy laugh. I didn't like that choice at all, honestly. But, anyway, as far as Fat Thor goes, yeah, not that big a deal with me as far as them making him funny throughout a good portion of the movie.
Business partner Jeremy Boring has pointed out.
Jeremy Boring. Boring, just like the first two Thor movies.
that it's pretty obvious from the film that they wanted Anthony Hopkins to come back and do a scene with Chris Hemsworth, and Chris Hemsworth, they weren't able to get Hemsworth to do it, so instead they brought back Rene Russo.
Honestly, I kind of thought that he had enough character arc, at least a satisfying amount, in my opinion, with Odin. I mean, Ragnarok was pretty much the cherry on top. But we did not hardly see any, or at least I don't remember anyways, a whole lot of development and interactions with him and his mom. So the fact that they decided to use his mom instead of Odin, I did not have that big a deal with. In fact, I think I liked that choice instead of the former that Ben is trying to mention here.
For a conversation, and it really doesn't work fantastically well.
Explain why. Because just a plain old statement like that does not convince me.
Thanos is built up in the first Avengers film as this guy with an interesting backstory and with an actual rationale, right? He feels that balance has to be brought back because he lived on a planet where overpopulation was a problem, so he snaps his fingers, half the people are gone, balance is restored. And now they bring us back to old Thanos, who still has that same mission, and they basically just turn him into Big Baddie, right? Now he doesn't have an interesting backstory.
I don't see what the point is right there, because he still overall does have the interesting backstory that's still set up. I mean, keep in mind, Ben, that the times of Endgame, with younger Thanos, with more sadistic Thanos, he still has the past story of the interactions with Gamora and so forth. I mean, yeah, he doesn't sacrifice Gamora like in Infinity War, which that is one thing that Infinity War Thanos has over Endgame Thanos. But in Endgame Thanos, he still has that whole thing with Gamora, the past story with her, adopting her, and so on and so forth. Oh, and also Nebula. Got to keep in mind Nebula. I mean, Nebula was kind of a side point to Thanos' character arc in Infinity War. But in Endgame, they don't really focus so much on the whole Gamora Thanos interaction and, character build-up. But instead, they focus more on the Nebula Thanos character build-up of those two. Of how he basically was so manipulative to Nebula to the point that younger Nebula cannot break that manipulative stranglehold that Thanos has on her. But older Nebula, the main timeline Nebula, is matured out of that state, and so she essentially kills her own past self, as you all who have seen the movie know.
Now he's just a sadist. And there's a line near the end of the film where he turns to Robert Downey Jr. or Captain America. I think it's maybe Captain America. And he says,
yeah, it was Captain America.
Your little planet, I'm going to enjoy destroying it. Okay, come on. Come on.
Well, you gotta keep in mind here, Ben, is that, with why that he's wanted to do that, he sees Earth as a big object, like the totality of Earth, not just half of the population, or even really just a select handful of people from Earth as a big obstacle to undo his progress. He just saw all of Earth, essentially, and really all of the population of the entire universe as an obstacle to, end up undoing what he was trying to do. So therefore, to make sure that all of his mission is complete and done and stays firm and concrete for the long term, he wants to undo everything, kill off everyone who might have a connection with anyone that he feels like he needs to, snap out of existence. And so that's the reasoning as to why that I saw that he thought he had to exterminate all of Earth's population and so forth. Not just because he was being sadistic. I'm sure that there was some sadism, but there's still a bit of a logical and ideological reasoning for why he was doing it as well. A rather screwed up ideological reasoning, but still.
If you want to draw a good villain, then you can't just make them a sadist. Every bad villain, like Steppenwolf from Justice League, is just a sadist who wants to do bad stuff. But Thanos had an interesting backstory, and the thing about Thanos is that Thanos was willing to sacrifice his own daughter for what he believed in. Right?
Again, that's one thing that Infinity War Thanos has over Endgame Thanos.
He's immoral, he's a bad person, but he's willing to make a sacrifice they don't even ask Robert Downey Jr. to make in the second Avengers film. So that is a problem as well. Now, there are two characters who I do think are treated well by the script. Black Widow is treated well by the script. Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner, is treated well by the script.
Okay, yeah, he did mention Hawkeye as the other character aside from Black Widow who has done justice.
Carol Danvers, the Captain Marvel character, I just have to say that she's insanely boring. So I didn't actually see the Captain Marvel film. I'm intending on going and seeing it.
Yeah, she wasn't that much more exciting in Captain Marvel either, Ben, just FYI. But yeah, Captain Marvel was pretty boring in Endgame, ultimately. And just ultimately wooden acting overall.
And at some point, I didn't really feel the compunction to see it. But in any case, she's in the film, but she's basically a block of wood that breaks things. And that's what Carol Danvers does. She doesn't have any character. You don't know why she's there. You don't know her motivations. She just flies around and she smashes things.
Well, in defense of Captain Marvel and, Brie Larson's character, even though I'm not too fond of Captain Marvel, ultimately the motivation as to why she's there is because Nick Fury was one of the people that was snapped out of existence as well, and that was who that she was connected to. But I don't quite fully explain that, I know, in Endgame, so I guess that is a bit of a problem, but And honestly, side note about Captain Marvel, I would not mind honestly, I don't mind Captain Marvel that much. In Endgame in particular, because like Ben says, she had little interaction with the people for anybody to play with the whole Mary Sue thing if they wanted to. But yeah, I don't have a problem with Captain Marvel if I can ignore the movie that's based off of her and the actress who is playing the character, honestly. And when it comes to the Captain Marvel movie, it was pretty meh, pretty mediocre. The beginning and middle were alright, but it was the end that I had more of a problem with. But that side tangent aside, now back on subject.
Alright. And she's Deus Ex Machina. Another point made by my business partner, we had a conversation about this morning, is that one of the problems with this film is that you also don't know the comparative power of the characters. So it's like every character has a power that is equally powerful, despite the fact that they don't. And there's a scene near the end where the Avengers headquarters is hit by 1 million missiles, and somehow Ant-Man, who is a human, and Jeremy Renner, who is a human, are fine.
And also, Rhodey is also a human. But here's what you gotta remember. He was also in an Iron Man suit. And for that matter, Ant-Man is not only a human, but he's also a human in a little shrinking suit and whatever. To where that he can shrink himself super small to where that barely anything hardly hits him and so forth. But as far as Hawkeye, yeah, Hawkeye is just a plain old human essentially. Basically, he's like the average Joe soldier of the group, I would say. He has no super soldier serum like Captain America does. He has no special suits like Rhodey, War Machine, or Iron Man, or anyone else does, or any superpowers of any kind. So the fact that he survived that was more of plot armor and sheer luck, ultimately. If they at least made it so that he got, a stabbed leg or something, it probably would have been a little bit more realistic, in my opinion. But that's just only a mild nitpick, ultimately.
They're the bottom of 20 stories. They're fine. Totally cool. That makes no sense.
Actually, no, it does make sense. As I explained, Ant-Man able to shrink himself so small to where that hardly anything smashes him, but Hawkeye I will give the benefit of the doubt on.
There's a scene where Thanos, who does not have the Infinity Gauntlet at this point, is fighting off Captain America and Thor and Iron Man. He's fighting off all three of them. Well, if you remember back to the first Avengers film, he barely holds off Thor alone, right? Thor shows up, and Thor nearly takes him out while he has the Infinity Stones. So if he doesn't have the Infinity Stones, he's basically just a big bad guy. So why are all three of them unable to take him out?
And this is probably the most off-base thing that Ben mentions, honestly. One thing that you gotta remember, Ben, is that Thor, he had been getting himself fat, becoming a lazy bum, and not exercising his powers and fighting capabilities for the past 5 years. So obviously he would have gone soft to where that he is weaker against Thanos than he was in Infinity War. Duh! And as far as Iron Man goes, yeah, I mean, I guess it does make a little less sense, but again, I would not suspect that Iron Man would be really like keeping up his fighting skills as he was like being a family man. So with Tony Stark and Thor, it's explainable. It's really easily explainable as to why they would be weaker against Thanos, and ultimately Thanos would be able to take on those two along with Captain America all at the same time. And Captain America, you got to remember as well, back in Infinity War, Captain America could barely hold back Thanos' hand, much less actually fight toe-to-toe with him. It's only like when he is actually able to like wield Mjolnir that he is actually able to go toe-to-toe fully with Thanos. But even then, as soon as he loses Mjolnir, he has nothing but his shield and, Thanos with his sword that can like cut through vibranium like it's nothing. He ultimately gets his ass kicked. Captain America does by Thanos. So really, Captain America is not exactly the ideal character to be fighting against Thanos as well. So you have two characters that did go softer before the fight, and then one character that did get stronger, but only halfway through the fight when the other two were like subdued for the moment. So there's my explanation as to why it is. And plus, Thanos, he is like what, 9 years younger in comparison to his himself when in Endgame. So there is that. So he would have had more vitality to him, more fighting skills, and whatnot. And he also had his armor, and of course his sword. Although there is that one video that goes talking about as to why that Thanos' double-bladed sword is like a mess. I would have to like look at that video to see why it is, but it can still like repel against Iron Man's blast like if it was a lightsaber towards laser bolt in Star Wars, and also cut through vibranium. So there is that to keep in mind, Ben.
And then there was the NFL ad recapitulation where they're trying to run the gauntlet between players, and it's like, oh, okay, I understand you're doing fan service. Look, there's Black Panther. Ooh, there's Spider-Man. Oh, look, they're handing it to this other character who we don't care about. Yay! And then
That was just a little cheesy, I will admit. But ultimately, I guess I would have liked to have seen like all these different characters fight hand to hand people more than focusing on passing on the gauntlet like character to character, like if it was like a big football game like Ben was kind of referencing right there. But it's just a mild nitpick is all.
And they're just kind of throwing in the gauntlet just to remind you that all these characters exist. The center of this universe was always supposed to be Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. They turned Thor into a loser.
Well, you gotta admit, yeah, he was a loser. He finds himself to be a loser for the fact that he failed the universe. Thor is a loser. That's kind of the point, Ben.
America is boring, and Iron Man, they don't give a full motivation and prohibit him from making a proper choice.
Captain America is not boring, honestly. I mean, they give him more development and more arc in this movie than in Infinity War. So, yeah. And Iron Man, again, I don't see your gripes about Iron Man.
Now, there are, again, scenes in this movie that are quite good. The scene between the Hulk, for example, the Mark Ruffalo character, and Tilda Swinton, the character from Doctor Strange, right?
I think she's referred to as the Ancient One is the actual character's name. I'm not sure.
Actually a good scene, right? The scene, there are the scene with Robert Downey Jr. and his dad. That's a good scene too. But overall, I felt like it was a mishmash. I felt like it didn't really work. I understand that for uber fans of Marvel, I'm not speaking as an uber fan of Marvel. I've seen virtually all of these films. I think that Captain Marvel.
Honestly, I'm not an uber fan of the MCU myself, but I don't know. I guess I am a little bit more of a fan than Ben, comparatively, anyways. But whatever.
Is the only one that I have not seen, but there are uber fans who are sitting there like just picking out the Easter eggs. Oh, remember when they did that in this movie, and then we're flashing back to that movie now. Isn't that cool? Isn't that funny? And there's a lot of stuff there, but that's fan service. It's not filmmaking, and it doesn't give an emotional resonance. The only emotional resonance really is Iron Man's death, which I guess is what it was supposed to be. And even there, I felt like it was diminished somewhat by the fact that he basically just dies in a normal adventure story that could have taken place in any of the other Iron Mans. Also, final critique. I don't feel the necessity to have a giant battle with all of the people in the universe at the end of every movie.
Mild nitpick right there, but yeah, it is starting to become a little bit more and more of a trope. I mean, I guess Lord of the Rings kind of popularized that idea of having like a big army versus army battle, and ever since that moment, everybody seemingly wants to repeat it. Narnia, like you said, Avengers Endgame, even Infinity War kind of had that same process as well, and so many other movies that people can mention. Even Robots, the movie by Blue Sky Studios, even a kids movie like Robots had a big army versus army battle that they felt like they had to shoehorn in there. So that is becoming a bit too much of a trope, more than a trope than it has to be.
I didn't like it at the end of Aquaman. I don't like
Cliche,
it.
rather.
In fact, the battle was much more interesting when it was just a couple of people fighting before all of these things show up. Before Doctor Strange unleashes the beast and all these people come walking through back from the dead. It felt throughout the movie like there were no stakes. And this is my big problem.
Yeah, no stakes aside from the possibility of Thanos snapping not just half of life, but all of life out of existence from the universe.
I didn't get anything that I thought was really unexpected. I felt like they deliberately lowered the stakes, not heightened the stakes, with that decision that I referred to about Iron Man. I felt like it was blasé and bland. I didn't feel like anyone was really in any danger, and even Iron Man's death is sort of inevitably foreshadowed by what happens to the Hulk when he puts on the gauntlet. So I wish I had liked the movie more.
Not exactly. I mean, I guess it would have been best if they explained exactly how the powers of the Infinity Stones worked. Like, the more that you're trying to do with those stones, the more it'll drain out of you, and so on and so forth. And the reason as to why that, anyway.
Since I spent 3 hours of my life on it and $50, the tickets for IMAX were expensive, man. But
Oh, really? You're gonna throw an ad in my face when we're this late about to end the video.
Say that I understand why people enjoyed it if you're a super fan, but I'm not going to. But I am not up with the. This is great.
Alright, so that was my response of Ben Shapiro's review of Avengers Endgame, and tell me if you all liked it. And I'm going to end this because it is getting late. It is 12:12 a.m. And yeah, tell me what you think. Do you like the green screen that I am doing right now with the blue fire background and the video and whatnot? So tell me what you all think. Am I off base? How off base has been? And let's talk in the comments. Anyway, I'm the Dark Conservatarian. Y'all have a good night, and God bless you all.